On a Sunday at 7 a.m., I woke up and noticed my wife Amanda wasn't in bed beside me. I called out her name, but no answer came back through our silent house. I searched every room, growing more anxious with each empty space I found. Then I opened the fridge to grab some water and saw it, a note stuck to a bottle. "Goodbye, loser. Never loved you anyway." My heart dropped as I rushed to her closet. Empty hangers swung gently mocking me. Everything she owned was gone. Trước khi tôi kể cho các bạn về cơn ác mộng đã xảy đến với cuộc đời tôi, hãy cho tôi biết bạn đang xem từ đâu và đừng quên subscribe để không bỏ lỡ những câu chuyện thật từ cuộc sống. I met Amanda 5 years ago at a small coffee shop in downtown Seattle. I was 32, working as a software developer at a mid-sized tech company. My life was comfortable but ordinary, steady income, a small circle of friends and weekends, spent hiking the nearby mountains or coding personal projects at home. That morning, I was trying to debug a particularly frustrating piece of code when she walked in. Amanda had this presence about her, confident and radiant, with long auburn hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to notice everything. When she accidentally spilled her coffee near my table, our conversation flowed naturally. She was intelligent, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in my work. For someone like me who had always been somewhat awkward in social situations, her attention felt like a gift. Our relationship developed rapidly. Within 3 months, we were seeing each other exclusively. Amanda was passionate and affectionate, always planning thoughtful dates or surprising me with small gifts. She worked in finance, or so she told me, as a consultant for wealthy clients. Her schedule was unpredictable, with frequent late-night calls and occasional weekend work, but I never questioned it. I was simply grateful to have found someone who seemed to value me. Just over a year after we met, we got married in a small ceremony. My parents had passed away years earlier, and Amanda claimed hers were estranged, living somewhere in Europe. Only a few friends attended our wedding, mostly mine. Looking back, I should have noticed the lack of personal connections in her life, but love has a way of blinding you to the obvious. The early days of our marriage were blissful. We bought a modest house in the suburbs with a view of the mountains and settled into a routine that felt comfortable and right. Amanda decorated our home with impeccable taste, creating spaces that felt both elegant and welcoming. We talked about starting a family someday, though. Amanda always suggested waiting until we were more financially secure. She showed intense interest in my career and finances, constantly encouraging me to seek promotions or consider higher-paying jobs. At the time, I thought it was because she believed in my potential. Now I recognize it was part of her calculated plan. Everything changed when my grandfather passed away 8 months into our marriage. He left me an inheritance of $750,000. It wasn't life-changing wealth, but it was substantial, enough to pay off our mortgage and still have a comfortable safety net. Amanda was incredibly supportive during my grief, attending the funeral with me and helping manage the paperwork that followed. As we discussed what to do with the inheritance, Amanda suggested pooling all our resources to simplify our finances. Marriage means sharing everything, she said, her eyes filled with what I thought was sincerity. Let me handle the financial side so you can focus on your career. Given her supposed background in finance, it made sense. I transferred the inheritance to our joint account without hesitation. Over the following months, subtle changes crept into our relationship. Amanda started working later, often coming home after I was already asleep. Our conversation grew shorter, less intimate. When I tried to discuss plans for the future, she would skillfully change the subject. The warmth that had characterized our early relationship began to fade, replaced by a coolness I couldn't quite name. Small arguments erupted over insignificant issues: dinner plans, household chores, weekend activities. Amanda became critical of things she had previously found endearing. My coding hobby was suddenly childish. My comfortable wardrobe became embarrassing. My friends were holding me back professionally. Each criticism chipped away at my confidence, making me increasingly dependent on her approval. Despite these changes, I remained committed to our marriage. I tried harder to please her, working longer hours and distancing myself from friends she disliked. I rationalized her behavior as stress from work, or perhaps a phase we needed to weather together. The first real sign something was seriously wrong came 3 months ago when I accidentally glimpsed a text message on her phone while she was in the shower. It was from someone saved as Jay, with words that seemed oddly intimate. When I cautiously brought it up, Amanda exploded in anger, accusing me of spying and violating her privacy. She claimed Jay was a female colleague going through a divorce who needed emotional support. I wanted to believe her, so I did. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something in my carefully constructed life was fundamentally wrong. That Sunday morning, when I found Amanda gone, changed everything. The cruel simplicity of her note, "Goodbye, loser. Never loved you anyway," cut through me like a knife. I called her cell phone immediately, only to hear the automated message that her number was no longer in service. She had planned this exit meticulously. I frantically called the few friends of hers I had met over the years. Each call led nowhere. Disconnected numbers, people claiming they barely knew her. One woman who sounded genuinely confused when I mentioned Amanda's name. It was as if the Amanda I knew had been systematically erasing her existence for months. In desperation, I called her mother, whose number Amanda had given me for emergencies. The woman who answered sounded nothing like the warm, European, accented woman Amanda had once briefly introduced me to on a video call. This woman's voice was cold American, and not at all surprised by my situation. "You're not the first, you know," she said matter-of-factly. "Amanda has always been good at finding men who aren't quite smart enough to see through her." Before I could respond, she hung up, leaving me with the sickening realization that even Amanda's family connections had been fabricated. With shaking hands, I logged into our joint bank account. The balance that should have shown over $600,000 read just $87.25. 5 years of savings and most of my inheritance gone. I dug deeper into our financial records and discovered Amanda had been systematically transferring small amounts to various accounts over several months, amounts just small enough not to trigger my attention. I tore through our home office searching for any clue to understand what had happened. Hidden in a locked drawer of her desk, I found a folder containing multiple identity documents, driver's licenses, passports, social security cards, all with different names, but all featuring Amanda's photograph. In another folder were account statements for banks I had never heard of, all in names that weren't hers, or mine. The depth of the deception was staggering. On her forgotten old laptop, I discovered photos of Amanda with a tall, dark-haired man I had never seen before. They were embracing intimately in locations I recognized from her supposed business trips: a beach in Miami, a restaurant in Chicago, a hotel room in Las Vegas. The dates on these photos aligned perfectly, with times she had told me she was working late or attending conferences. I searched her name on social media and found her profiles had been either deleted or renamed. Every trace of our relationship had been systematically removed. Wedding photos gone, couple selfies deleted, even mutual friends unfriended. It was as if our 5-year relationship had been digitally erased overnight. The shock gave way to a profound physical pain. I couldn't eat or sleep. When Monday morning came, I called in sick to work, unable to focus on anything beyond the gaping hole in my life. My colleague Jack came by after work, concerned when I hadn't answered his texts. He found me surrounded by Amanda's papers, unwashed and unshaven. "You need to call the police," he insisted, after I explained what had happened. "This is theft identity fraud, maybe even more." The police officer who took my report was sympathetic but not optimistic. "Unfortunately, sir, in cases where spouses share legal access to accounts, it's difficult to pursue criminally. It becomes a civil matter." He recommended I freeze all my credit accounts and consult a lawyer. Jack put me in touch with Frank Thompson, a private investigator who specialized in fraud cases. Frank's office was cluttered, but organized, with filing cabinets lining the walls and multiple computer screens displaying what looked like surveillance footage. "I see cases like yours more often than you'd think," Frank said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. "Con artists target people with good incomes, stable jobs, and trusting natures. They play the long game, years sometimes, waiting for the big score." He agreed to take my case, warning me it wouldn't be cheap but promising to find Amanda. What Frank uncovered in just those first few days left me reeling. Amanda Wilson wasn't even her real name. Monday morning brought the beginning of a financial nightmare. My phone started buzzing with fraud alerts from my bank and credit card companies. Transactions I never made were being processed in my name. Luxury purchases at high-end stores in Mexico City, cash withdrawals from ATMs in Rio de Janeiro, hotel bookings in Buenos Aires. I spent hours on the phone with various financial institutions trying to freeze accounts and dispute charges. With each call, the picture grew more horrifying. Amanda had opened 5 credit cards in my name using my personal information. She had taken out a personal loan against our house. She had even attempted to access my retirement accounts, though thankfully those required in-person verification that she couldn't fake. The total damage was approaching $200,000 on top of the emptied joint account. My perfect credit score plummeted as charges were declined and accounts flagged for fraud. Creditors began calling day and night, demanding payments for debts I never incurred. Frank's investigation revealed that Amanda had a criminal record under the name Natalie Peterson in Arizona for similar scams run against 2 previous boyfriends. She had served 8 months in prison 5 years ago, right before she met me. The timing explained her lack of social media history and why she had few long-term friends. She had been building a new identity, preparing for her next target, me. The man in the photos turned out to be Robert Keller, another con artist with whom she had worked multiple scams. Frank found evidence they had targeted at least 3 other men before me, always following the same pattern. Amanda would establish a relationship, integrate herself completely into the target's life, wait for a financial opportunity, then disappear with everything she could take. The stress began affecting my work performance. My focus was shattered, my confidence destroyed. During an important client presentation, I completely froze, unable to remember basic information about the project I'd been leading for months. 2 weeks after Amanda left, my boss called me into his office with a sympathetic but firm expression. They were letting me go with a modest severance package that would barely cover a month of expenses. Without income, with mounting fraudulent debts, and with my savings gone, I couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. The bank sent a foreclosure notice 4 weeks after Amanda disappeared. I had 30 days to either pay what I owed or lose my home. I spiraled into a deep depression. I barely left my bedroom, surrounded by reminders of Amanda and our life together. Empty wine bottles accumulated beside my bed as alcohol became my only reliable comfort. I stopped answering calls from friends. I ignored the increasingly urgent notices that arrived in the mail each day. On my darkest night, 6 weeks after Amanda left, I found myself sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at a bottle of sleeping pills and calculating how many it would take to end the pain permanently. My phone buzzed with an email notification. I almost ignored it, but something compelled me to look. The message came from an anonymous account. No text, just attachments. When I opened them, my blood went cold. Photos of Amanda and her partner Robert, lounging on a yacht, drinking champagne at an exclusive club, posing in front of a luxury villa. They were living lavishly on my money, while my life lay in ruins. The final photo showed them holding up glasses in a mocking toast with a caption, "Thanks for funding our retirement, sucker." I hurled my phone against the wall, watching as the screen shattered into a spiderweb of cracks, a perfect metaphor for what had become of my life. That night I drank until I passed out on the floor, wondering if I would ever find my way back from this betrayal. I was at my lowest point when the call came. Hungover, unshaven for weeks, facing eviction within days, I almost didn't answer the unknown number. When I did, the woman's voice was crisp, professional, and entirely unexpected. "Mr. Thompson, this is Special Agent Sarah Johnson, with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to talk about your wife, Amanda Wilson." 2 hours later, I sat in a sterile conference room at the FBI field office across from Agent Johnson and her partner, Agent Rodriguez. The table between us was covered with photos of Amanda and Robert, along with several other people I didn't recognize. "Your wife is actually Catherine Morrison," Agent Johnson explained. "She's part of an international fraud ring we've been tracking for 3 years. They target individuals for financial exploitation, but their operations extend to corporate espionage and identity theft on a massive scale." Agent Rodriguez slid a folder toward me. "We believe you're their most recent victim, but certainly not the only one. We've identified at least 12 others across 4 states." The agents explained that the FBI had been building a case against this organization for years. But Catherine and her associates were careful, constantly changing identities and crossing jurisdictions to avoid capture. They needed my help, my testimony, and any evidence I had collected could be crucial to finally bringing them to justice. "Why would I help?" I asked bitterly. "Nothing will bring back what I lost." Actually, Agent Johnson said, "Cooperation often leads to better outcomes for victims like yourself. Asset recovery is possible in some cases, and your insurance claims for fraud would be strengthened by a criminal conviction." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something other than despair, a small, tentative hope that some justice might be possible. I agreed to help, sharing everything I had discovered and all the documents Frank had collected. Over the next month, I worked closely with the FBI team. I provided details about Catherine's patterns, preferences, and behaviors that helped them track her movements. I identified her handwriting on documents, her voice on recordings, her face in surveillance footage from luxury hotels where she had been using my stolen credit cards. The investigation revealed that Catherine and Robert had victimized dozens of people, not just the 12 initially identified. They were part of a sophisticated network that had stolen millions over the past decade. My case was just one small piece of a much larger criminal enterprise. Then came the news I never expected. Using information I had provided, the FBI located Catherine and Robert at a resort in Cancun, Mexico. Working with Mexican authorities, they conducted a raid that resulted in the arrest of not only Catherine and Robert, but 3 other members of their organization as well. When Agent Johnson called to tell me, I surprised myself by laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh, but it wasn't entirely bitter either. It was the laugh of someone who had survived the worst and could finally see a path forward. "There's something you should know," I told her, when I regained my composure. "Something I haven't told anyone." The truth was, my grandfather had never left me $750,000. The actual inheritance was closer to $5,000. Enough for a nice vacation perhaps, but hardly life-changing. The rest was a fiction I had created to test a growing suspicion. 6 months before Catherine left, I had begun to notice inconsistencies in her stories. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Explanations that didn't quite add up. A growing distance that contradicted her increasing interest in my finances. I created elaborate fake documents showing the inheritance and left them in a home safe that I accidentally left unlocked. I established a joint account with an impressive balance, but kept the majority of my actual savings in a private account Catherine knew nothing about. I forwarded our mail to a post office box to track what financial applications were being made in my name. In essence, I set a trap, and Catherine walked right into it. I knew she was planning something, I explained to Agent Johnson. I just didn't know how big it was. When she left taking what she thought was my life savings, she actually took only about $40,000. A lot of money, yes, but not the financial ruin she intended. The fraud alerts from Monday were real. Catherine had indeed opened credit cards in my name and attempted to use them. But I had placed fraud alerts on my credit months earlier, limiting the damage she could do. Most of the charges were declined immediately, and those that went through were covered by my credit card protection policies. I hadn't lost my job because of poor performance. I had requested a temporary leave of absence to focus on the investigation. My home wasn't in foreclosure. The notices were part of my documentation of Catherine's scheme. And that anonymous email, with the taunting photos, I had worked with Frank to trace it back to its source, providing the FBI with critical server information that helped locate Catherine and Robert. Catherine Morrison was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. Robert and their associates received similar sentences. Through asset seizure and my insurance claims, I recovered most of what had been stolen. The remaining financial loss seemed a small price to pay for the valuable lesson I had learned. I sold the house that held too many painful memories and moved to Portland, where I started a new job at a cybersecurity firm. My experience made me particularly valuable in helping companies protect themselves and their clients from fraud. A year after Catherine's arrest, I met Rachel at a community garden volunteering event. Our relationship developed slowly, built on honest communication and genuine sharing. When I finally told her my story, her response wasn't pity, but admiration for my resilience. What Catherine never understood was that money can be replaced. Time cannot. She wasted years of her life constructing elaborate deceptions, only to end up with nothing. Her greed blinded her to the real value of human connection, of building something genuine and lasting. I still have trust issues, understandably. But I've learned that trust isn't about never getting hurt. It's about being brave enough to be vulnerable again after you've been wounded. It's about recognizing that one person's betrayal doesn't define all relationships. The truth always emerges eventually. No matter how clever the deception, or how carefully constructed the lies, reality has a way of asserting itself. Catherine thought she was the hunter, but in the end her prey turned out to be more perceptive than she anticipated. Have you ever been deceived by someone you trusted completely? Share your story in the comments below. I read every comment and would love to hear how you recovered and found strength after betrayal. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences, and share with someone who might need to hear that they can survive deception and come out stronger. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that after the darkest nights, the sunrise is all the more beautiful.